think we did it another time like this.
Good morning and welcome to worship at First Mennonite Church of Denver. I'm so glad that you have all made it here safely, that we can be out and enjoy the sunshine. May this be a time where we can join together in body as we are here in the building and in spirit with our members and friends who are live streaming with us today. Let us begin our worship.
Would you all stand, please, and turn to number 392. I understand that we don't know this piece, so today I'll take it a little slow.
Good morning, strong and brave ones. Let's see. So first, before I introduce myself, if there are any children here, please join Rachel in the back. We might have a small crowd this morning. It looks like I just see a couple of kids. I'm Katrina Schrock. I have been attending here with my husband since I think 1992-ish. We raised our daughter here. She is now an occupational therapist in Iowa City and trying to learn what the world is like to be an adult, so that's pretty exciting. I'm glad to be here this morning. Certainly want to hold space that we know it's a challenging time for our congregation, and look forward to what more we will hear this morning. Thank you.
You guys braved the cold to come out. Thank you. You had to. Yeah, sometimes we don't. I get it. Sometimes we choose. We don't have the choice. I totally understand that too. All right. So today, the Bible story is about Jesus helping people. Okay? So one of his friend's moms was sick, and Jesus went to go visit her. And he held her hand, and she got better. Good morning. Hi, Akina. So glad you're here. And he held her hand. She had had a really bad fever and was very sick. And back then, we didn't have medicine to help people feel better. So Jesus held her hand, and then she was better. It was a miracle that he performed. And so everyone was so happy, and later that night, they invited everybody in the town who was not feeling good to come and visit Jesus, and he made them all better. How do you think he felt after helping all those people? What do you guys think? Lydia's like, thumbs up, I bet. Yeah, he's like, look at me, I'm awesome. Okay. Do you think he might have felt a little tired? Yeah. Sometimes. Hello, Avery. All right, it's good to see you. I think you might have been a little tired. Have you guys ever helped people and then, you get a little tired afterwards? Yeah, it can be a little draining. So, the next morning, he got up really early and he went alone to go pray. Okay, and then his friends found him. Well, they're looking all over him for him. They're like, Jesus, where are you? And he's like, hey, guys, I'm here. And they're like, come on, all these people are waiting for you. And Jesus says, all right, let's go. Let's go find these people and help them. But do you know why he was able to do that and say, okay, let's go? He was able to do that because he had taken a break to go by himself, to take some time of quiet, to talk to God, to relax a little bit, and that rejuvenated him. Does anyone know what rejuvenated means? You kind of do? What do you think, Lydia, Micah? Yeah, that's a good, Micah said it's like a reset. So to rejuvenate, you kind of reset. Okay, you can start over, you get new energy. Like if your computer's glitching, you just turn that sucker off sometimes, and then it can get itself back together, and it can start over and be like, all right. Unless it's a really old computer that's about to break, that's right. Then sometimes there's no hope. But Jesus was able to get rejuvenated, to have this energy again because he took a break to talk to God, to get back to the true reason for why he was doing this, to get some more energy, and then he was able to go help more people. So do any of you guys take naps? Do you take naps anymore, Avery? Yeah, Akina, do you take naps? Yeah? With your teddy, I love it. A white teddy. It was your birthday, Avery? I love it. Evelyn, do you take naps? No? What about my older kids here? No, she says. I don't know about that. Micah and Lydia, do you still take naps? No, so they don't take naps. I know, when we're 3, but you know what? Naps are awesome, and sometimes we need to take that nap or rest so that we can get energy again to deal with people, because sometimes, we love people, but they can also sometimes drain our energy, even if we're doing good things with them. So our little friends still take naps, but I encourage all of us, it's okay to take naps sometimes and to take some rest and to rejuvenate ourselves, okay? It's not just for our little friends who probably are like, I don't want to take a nap. But even us, we should take that time out, and maybe it's not going to bed with your teddy. Maybe it is, okay? But maybe it's just resting. Maybe it's praying or doing something else to take a break. You did? I'm sorry. All right. So this week, think about taking a break for yourself if you need to take a rest, okay? So that you can get back out there and do your best work and help people and be kind and all those good things, okay? All right, you guys can go back to your grown-ups.
About you all, but I've got a nap on my horizon this afternoon. No, maybe after the snow is shoveled. Will you please join me in the call to worship? I will read the light print, and if you will join me in the dark, that'd be great. To worship is to stand in awe under a heaven of stars before a flower, a leaf in sunlight, or a grain of sand. To worship is to be silent, receptive, before a tree astir with the wind or the passing shadow of a cloud. To worship is to work with dedication and with skill. It is to pause from work and listen to a strain of music. To worship is to sing with the singing beauty of the earth. It is to listen through a storm to the still small voice within. Will you pray the invocation with me? Barely midnight, all of us hunkered down around ashes of a fire. The animals asleep, our companions, hunger, nagging doubt. Our wants are reasonable. Provisions for the family, better health, a better bed than this hard slope, good grazing, sturdy lambs, and death to predators whose hostile howls invade our restless dreams. But let's be honest. Let's admit right now what we want most is foolproof evidence that God exists and knows we're here. We want our sorrows noted, our frantic labor recognized. We want the Holy One, although it's dark and late the hour, to hunker with us at the fire's glow and speak with us right here, right now. Amen.
Number 732, and we will do verses 1 and 2 in English and then in Spanish.
The scripture this morning is from Mark chapter 1, verses 29 through 39. As soon as they left the synagogue, they entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Now Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they told him about her at once. He came, he took her hand by the hand and lifted her up. Then the fever left her, and she began to serve them. That evening, at sunset, they brought to him all who were sick or possessed with demons, and the whole city was gathered around the door. And he cured many who were sick with various diseases and cast out many demons. And he would not permit the demons to speak, because they knew him. In the morning, while it was still very dark, he got up and went out to a deserted place, and there he prayed. And Simon and his companions hunted for him. When they found him, they said to him, "Everyone is searching for you." He answered, "Let us go on to the neighboring towns, so that I may proclaim the message there also. For that is what I came out to do." And he went throughout Galilee, proclaiming the message in their synagogues and casting out demons.
It is beautiful, isn't it? There's a mixed bag. Boy, when I was shoveling yesterday, as we were shoveling, the back sure gave us indication of what it felt like. But boy, I paused a number of times and just took in the beauty of this wet snow on the landscape. It's good to be together. And for those that couldn't make it or are there at home, we're grateful you're joining us today too. So sometimes I wake at 2:30 in the morning. rather, probably more times that seems than not. So does anybody have any idea what that's like? So when you do wake up in the middle of the night, what's on your mind these days? What occupies your thoughts? What's there when you're sitting there for the next hour, like me? And for those of you that have no idea what that's like and you just always sleep through the night, what occupies your heart and your head space? Whether you're on a walk or you're daydreaming at work or you're in your car somewhere by yourself, whatever it is, during your waking hours when there's those spots of some quiet, what takes up space in your head and your heart? What are you thinking about? Is it a family conflict? Is it the fall presidential election, which is really a misnomer because in our era it's 4 years, 24/7, it seems like, since the last election. And is that something on your mind a lot? Is there a major project at work consuming you? Is it a concern for your elderly parents or a deep concern for one of your children? Is it the violence in the Gaza Strip or in the Middle East and wondering, and you ponder, is this going to blow up into some major world conflict far beyond the violence and the destruction of lives now? Or is it where we sit as a congregation and wondering what the near future or not so near future will look like for us? Or is it being called to something? Do you think about, am I being urged and pulled and pushed and moved a bit to do something with my life, either in my vocation or as a volunteer? Or does it have to do with what you sense is happening in your spirit, your attitudes, your words, how you're living at home or among your colleagues, coworkers? Whatever the issue is, whether it's some big global societal issue or whether it's something just drilled down into a real specific thing in your life, how do you want to live with respect to those things? What do you want your life to look like in terms of your actions, your behavior, your attitudes, and how you live? So there are various ways and places we get guidance for how to live, where we get wisdom and direction. There are a lot of ways we receive this divine wisdom of how to kind of unpack it and live it out. One of the specific ways that we've named, and other Christians have as well, is in the life of Jesus, in his teachings, in his very life, what he did, what he said. And so we ask the question of, what did Jesus say, or how did he live? How might we live in that way? And it's not so much that you're going to get a specific answer of, as you look to Jesus, what candidate do I vote for, or what parenting style do I use for a child, but getting some global, big picture direction. But the main question I'd like for us to look at today is behind that question. And that is, how are you and how am I equipped to live the way I want to live? Even if you say, this is the way of Jesus, how am I equipped to live that way? How am I empowered to do that? So I'm going to pull a 16th century Anabaptist thing here. And so for those of you that maybe aren't super familiar with the Anabaptist Mennonite church and Anabaptist movement, it was rooted and birthed in the 16th century out of this Anabaptist movement. That's sort of it. And there was one of these persons, 16th century Anabaptist, that I heard a line that he said over and over. And the first time I heard it was when I went to seminary. But I'm guessing some of you, if you went to a Mennonite college or if you grew up in some Mennonite church, you might have heard this line. And it's by a guy named Hans Denk. And so here's what he said. Again, I heard this over and over and over again. he said this, wrote this: "No one can know Christ truly except by following him daily in life." No one can know Christ fully and truly except by following him daily in life. That's been an emphasis in our tradition, especially. It's not that we have the correct, precise creed, per se, or confession of faith. It's not that we have sort of some spiritual experiences that are divorced from the nitty-gritty of life, or life in the marketplace, life in our society. It's not that has been the emphasis, but how do we follow Jesus daily in life? And we hear it often in the biblical record. You hear it by Jesus saying often, "Come follow me, come follow me." Or 1 Peter, one of the letters that we have in these early followers and these early Christians, 1 Peter 2, in this letter says, "For to this you've been called, because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example so that you should follow in his steps." And there's another letter. It's plastered throughout these letters, and we see it in the Gospels. And here's another letter written to a church in one of these communities in Ephesus. And the invitation and urging is that we be kind and compassionate and forgiving. And then the line goes after that, "Therefore, be imitators of God as beloved children, and walk in love just as Christ loved us." So as Christ, as Jesus. So what did Jesus say then? And what did he teach? What did he do if we're to live in that way? In the example of Jesus. So in this gospel text today, Mark 1 that was read, what do we see Jesus doing there? If we do believe this, and I'm taking that as a given, we want to seek to, in a very imperfect way, live in the way of Jesus and follow Jesus, the ethics of Jesus, the pattern and the big picture of what Jesus did and what he said. If that is the case, what did he do here? So here's just an example. So in the first verses that were read, the first section, he's doing a lot what we see if you read the Gospels. He's out doing compassionate acts of mercy and of kindness and of grace and justice, and he's healing persons. And then the next day, the same thing. He's up and he's doing the same kinds of stuff. Compassion and grace and kindness and healing. Sort of announcing this good news as opposed to the bad news that folks are hearing. A lot of activity, a lot of action and doing, healing, announcing good news. An example of a broader mission of healing when we are to be invited to walk in this way as well, to be agents of healing and mercy and grace and justice and peace. But what also did he do right in the middle of that? I'm going to read it again, one verse. So all this activity, all this doing, and then the next day, same thing, out doing these works of justice and grace and mercy. But here, I'll read again, verse 35, sandwiched right in the middle of it. In the morning, while it was still very dark, he got up and he went to a deserted place, a lonely place, and there he prayed. He was there alone with, one of the favorite words Jesus would use would be with Abba, a very strong personal relational term of he's talking about God. Being alone in a solitary place set aside to pray. And as it turns out, that's not an isolated incident in the life of Jesus. We come to find out he did it a lot. In fact, Luke, one of the writers of the Gospels, Luke, records it, trying to record the activities of Jesus and pass them on to next generations, says in chapter 22, as was his custom. Word is a word for habit. As was Jesus' habit, he did it all the time. Prayed. Building prayer into the middle of his life. So what might that mean for us? What are we to make of it? Well, I believe we ought to make a lot of it. And I think it's quite vital to us, in fact. Quite significant. As we consider the example of Jesus in our lives. You know, as I look back in my life, I heard a lot, and I don't know if you relate to this or not, but I heard a lot about the invitation, and I read a lot about it too, in seminary days or in my study to preach each week. I read this stuff a lot. And I heard it a lot even as a kid. I heard a lot about following Jesus and using Jesus as example and model for what we want our lives to look like. If we say Jesus is the embodiment of God in the flesh, if we say there's this mystery of divine human, and we say, well, if we want to know what life looks like in its goodness and wholeness and what might bring the deepest joy for our lives and for the world, look at Jesus. I heard that a lot about following Jesus, especially with relationship to peacemaking and justice and grace, compassion, welcome to all, mercy for the stranger and the alien, grace for those on the margins, for the poor and the broken. I heard that a lot. And you know what? I'm there. I believe it. I hope we continue to hold on to that. And that continues to form and shape us. I'm grateful for that. But I will say, I heard very little about this. Jesus as an example and model for spiritual formation or spirituality or for prayer or meditation. I didn't hear that very often. Right now, especially, it seems like it's more so maybe in my lifetime than others. Maybe it's not the case. It just seems that way. People distort and pull things out of context in a scripture. People in Christian churches will say something that has no bearing on the very nature of God in the big picture, the global picture of the Bible. We'll pull something out of context and almost turn God into something like a violent God. And you're pulling it out of context. But that's a concern. How we look at things in its context. We have to. But I think perhaps a concern for us is that we don't cherry pick with relationship to Jesus as an example and model in our life as well. And that Jesus is not only an example and model for peacemaking, loving of enemies, compassion for those on the margins, and so on, but also for spirituality. Looking to Jesus as an example for whatever that looks like, time apart, prayer, listening, and spiritual formation. So I'm going to go back to Hans Denk, that 16th century dude, and that line that I heard over and over and over again. But I had an aha moment my last year of seminary, because it was then that I heard the line that came immediately after that line that he wrote. You want to hear it? This really had an impact on me. So here's what Hans Denk said, the whole thing, both sentences. No one can know Christ truly except by following him daily in life. Right after that, he says, and no one can truly follow Christ unless one knows him. And no one can truly faithfully follow him unless one know him. For me, that's a beautiful both-and statement. And I'm in my second half of life, I'm a big both-and person instead of either-or. In very imperfect ways, an invitation to follow Jesus in the way of mercy, peacemaking, and justice and grace, and in the way of spiritual formation and spirituality as well. Howard Thurman was a black American pastor, writer, professor, teacher, leader in the civil rights and interracial movement early on in our country in the 20th century. And he said this: don't get caught up in this the language of mystical, meaning some isolated hermit in some cave or convent or monastery. But he says this: mystical consciousness was part of Jesus' life. It deepened his sense of self and his intimacy with God. These experiences made him sure of God's presence, God's love, and commission for a ministry of love. And I want to use the words also of Richard Rohr, who's been one of those voices that's calling to put things together too, of both contemplation and action, of both like living and also our time and listening and life apart. And he said, Richard Rohr said this: God offers quiet, contemplative experiences. God also calls us to be prophetic and to be involved in critical involvement in the pain and suffering of our world, both at the same time. This is so obvious in the life and ministry of Jesus, Rohr says, that I wonder why it has not been taught as an essential part of Christianity. Well, I'm there, because I think it is together. And it's not a good deal to separate those, not to have some isolated spirituality that has no connection to life here, as well as not to isolate the living in justice and a life of love separated from what we see in Jesus, a connecting with the divine. So what does that look like for you, or what does it look like for me? Is something each of us have to answer, and it's not the same. I grew up with a template I was given. You're supposed to do this and this and this, you know. I include some of those things, and I also have a whole bunch of other stuff that work for me. What's that for you? And I would encourage you to look into yourself, take some space to consider what that might look like. A little later, I'll hand out something that will hopefully just prompt some ideas for you. So I just finished a memoir by Bono. Bono, like one word, Bono. Everybody knows Bono. One word here. You have U2 band. I just finished a memoir. I don't usually read those biographies or autobiographies or so on, but it was interesting for me in any case. Anyhow, Bono, as some of you would know, has done a lot of work with the AIDS epidemic in Africa and did some pretty significant stuff, and partnered with a lot of folks, and also debt relief for nations. And as part of that, he talked about the joy he had of connecting with Bishop Tutu on an occasion, and talking about the hard work of trying to dismantle apartheid and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that Tutu is leading and so on, and some of that really, really hard work. And he sat down with Bishop Tutu, and this is what Bono said. I once asked Bishop Tutu if it was hard, with all his work, to find time for prayer and meditation. He shot me one of those looks. How do you think we can do any of this work without prayer and meditation? I think Bishop Tutu got what Jesus was doing here in Mark 1. And may we be renewed in sort of getting what Jesus was doing here in Mark 1 and elsewhere. And may we be led by the Spirit to seek ways to be formed and transformed within, so with the very presence and love of God, so that that love spills out in love for our families and our community, our neighbors, and the world, with the very presence and love of God. Amen.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you, Phil, very much for your words. As we transition into our time of offering, I would like to add a both and, that the practice of giving to the church for the benefit of God's work throughout the world, that this regular giving is also a spiritual discipline. Even though you may sign up a pledge early in the year and it automatically comes out of your account, as you review your accounts, consider for a moment, pause at what that offering is, and how it is that it is nurturing you to be a generous giver. I'd like to invite Randy forward with a couple of words from our board.
Good morning. As most of you guys know, we hired Carlene Hill over a year ago for her help temporarily, a 6-month term originally. She is currently making plans to move on, probably to Chicago. And so the search committee has been active trying to find the next person for our administrative role. And I'm happy to announce that we have hired Lydia Cooper, and she will be starting a week from tomorrow, Monday the 12th, and training with Carlene for 3 weeks, whatever it takes for that. So we are excited to announce that, and we'll have something for Carlene, no doubt, yet before she departs, and we'll also introduce Lydia soon. Secondly, we know we've put a lot of emails out lately. We're going to be trying to post more regularly to the website, so we're in the process of trying to make that happen, and there'll also be some things with facilitation stuff that will start appearing there. So you might start thinking about looking at that member page more often. We are pleased this morning to introduce you to the facilitation team that is going to be working with us. If I find the right paper here. There we go. After interviewing several facilitator teams, 2 of those interviews stood out to us, and the leadership board is pleased to announce that we're going to bring a collaboration between the firm of 3 Stories Consulting and the 2 principals, Leslie Lewis and Deb Weitzel, who are, along with David Miller, who is a professor at AMBS. These people will be walking with FMC over the next few months. David brings a pastor's perspective and is very familiar with the MCUSA process for conducting investigations, such as the one that's been taking place here. He currently serves as a teaching associate in the Church Leadership Center at Anabaptist Mennonite Biblical Seminary, AMBS, and is a consultant to church leaders, congregations, and church-related organizations. He's also a qualified Healthy Boundaries trainer with the Faith Trust Institute, an organization that works with congregations and faith organizations to create safe and healthy communities. Previously, David served as a Mennonite pastor and taught at AMBS, Goshen College, and Heston College. David is currently completing an international teaching assignment for much of February and will become more active in FMC activities once he returns. 3 Stories Consulting is a local team, Longmont, if I got that right, with extensive work in restorative justice between individuals and larger groups such as ours. Their expertise and interest in helping groups create environments that can help resolve complex problems and help take on new challenges in order to move beyond the status quo. In other words, new models of interacting together is what drew us to them. They've talked about listening to stories, and in fact named their company, I believe, based on this: the individual stories, the others' stories, and the whole story. Leslie and Deb, I hope I got that close to correctly about how you named it. If you guys want to start heading up this way, Deb is a veteran restorative transformative justice practitioner. She notes that she holds the restorative values of relationship, respect, responsibility, and reciprocity as her guiding light. And we've quickly found her to be a person who listens deeply and has a true desire, plus the skills to help enable us to learn from each other and together. Deb co-produces and hosts the Restorative Justice Chronicles podcast, which lifts up the voices of people who have experienced restorative justice processes. we'll be interested to hear more about that, Deb, from you. Leslie specializes in strategic planning and organizational development. As a board, we're already noting her knowledge and skills gained through her extensive background in conflict resolution, mediation, and restorative justice. She's also a published writer and a playwright, which we'll have to ask her more about as well. Interestingly, she has told us that she originally became interested in restorative justice through contact with Mennonites, so it's another story that we'll want to hear. Leslie and Deb, I'll let you guys sort of introduce us to yourselves a little bit more and tell us a little bit about what the process might be. And you can come here, or they might put that one, whichever you would prefer.
Thanks, Randy.
We should be on a mic, though, because we're still live. Yeah, we're still live on website.
This one. I'm going to use this one. Can you guys hear me all right? Excellent. So I am Deb Witzel, and it is an honor to be with you all today. I will tell you that improv is my other world. I do a form of improv called playback theater. And so I have my script, but scripted theater is really not my jam. So I brought it because I want to make sure I hit all my marks. I am a 20-year practitioner in restorative justice practices. I would venture to say that restorative justice practices is probably not just my professional practice, but my spiritual practice. And it brings me to that place that Paul is talking about, that connection with spirit every day, all the time. And so that is what I hope to demonstrate as we do our work with you. Dance with the microphone. So now my bullet points. I founded 3 Stories Consulting in 2013 after being a decade with a nonprofit organization called the Longmont Community Justice Partnership, which is where I began my restorative justice career. And I moved from there to being the state court administrator's inaugural restorative justice coordinator and worked statewide to help bring the values and principles of restorative practices to district attorneys' offices. So I have experience working with prosecutors in learning these values and principles as well. So I said this is my life's work. I will tell you also that I raised my daughter, who's now 29 years old, crazy, in the restorative way, and we were having a good laugh about what it means to raise your child in these values and principles. It means that your child really calls you to the principles when there's a conflict. So I will tell you, I have life experience in a very deep way in these values and principles. And then I will just tell you the last piece, which is my current passion project is a restorative approach to intimate violence, or domestic violence is how we call it in a lot of contexts. And that work with the Restorative Approaches to Intimate Violence Project is a place where I really have the privilege of witnessing those stories that Randy was talking about, the before story, the current story, and then dreaming into the future story. So I consider not only being with you all, but being with anyone who is willing to share these pieces of their healing journey with me and my partner, a true privilege. So thank you very much for being with us.
I'm Leslie Lewis, and Deb brought me into her partnership a few years ago. We met doing restorative work in Longmont. So my journey with conflict resolution, mediation, restorative practices began when I was in divinity school. I was getting my master's in divinity in psychology and religion at Union Theological Seminary in New York City. And that's when I discovered this field and just fell in love with it, because for me, it's about I liked being the bridge that could help people cross and meet and go from one side to another, and maybe stand on the bridge and look at the water together. And that to me had a lot more appeal than being situated in any one place. So I began exploring it. I worked with a group called Children's Creative Response to Conflict, which I worked in school systems all over the New York metro area. So that was my introduction to the field. And it was at that time that I discovered the Lombard Mennonite Peace Center, which is where, this is 3 decades ago, I did my very first mediation training with Dick Blackburn. And it was extraordinary. It was wonderful. So, there was nothing that would ever turn me away from it. It just kept accelerating. At that time in divinity school, I also did clinical pastoral education as a chaplain at Stanford Hospital. So that sort of launched me on this journey. I then ended up running the Dispute Settlement Center, which served courts, police, school systems, housing projects, you name it, anybody, neighbors, landlords, tenants. And there was a specialty we had with working with interfaith groups, presbyteries, congregations, and that served Southwest Connecticut, and I did that for a while as the executive director. I eventually moved here, and it was at that time that I was introduced to restorative justice by reading Howard Zayer's book, and that just flipped everything on its head, and I pursued that, and I brought that into the court system in Connecticut, and we worked with juveniles and adults there. Eventually moved to Colorado to raise my youngest daughter, and that's where I met Deb at the Longmont Community Justice Partnership. It's changed its name a couple of times. So that's where we met doing work together. And we've had a fast and furious friendship, colleagueship ever since. And let me see if I hit all my points too. Yeah, so basically my work now has evolved where I really like doing work with leadership of organizations to bring a restorative practices, a restorative lens to strategic planning and organizational development. So what I'm loving about this work is that I get to work with everybody in the organization. So leadership and congregation members and everybody. So that's exciting to me. So I'm very happy to be here.
So we wanted to tell you all a little bit about how we work. Can you hear me okay? Okay, good. And I'm definitely going to use my bullet points on this. So 3 Stories, that's our company, focuses on what Randy said, your story, the other story, and the story of the whole. And I reframe that just a little bit because it's not the whole story, but the story of the whole. And so I just want you to, as you're considering coming into working with us, recognize that we hold your story. We want to hold your story. We want to hold the story of each, of your story and the other, and the story of the whole, you all as a congregation. We also focus on what happened. So there is a past for all of us. Some of us have a perspective about that. Some of us have a different perspective about that. We also are interested in what happened and how you were affected by what happened. So that's the second story, how people have been affected by what happened and how you're feeling about that. That's the present, right? We've talked about the past. The present is how you're feeling about it right now. And then together co-creating a future. the future story. So that's the third story that you will create together. We choose to listen deeply to those who choose to participate. It's important for you all to know that our work, this deep work that we will do, is voluntary for everyone. So it is your choice to participate or not. And that's an important thing to recognize as we consider moving forward together. We listen to those who have been impacted, those who are responsible, and those who have felt the ripple effects, the community. So that's another set of 3 stories. The people responsible, the people who have been harmed, and the ripple effect of how the greater community has been impacted. On any given day, any one of us could be in any one of those seats. And I think this comes back also to what you were saying, Paul. No, I'm sorry, Paul's in the back. You're Phil. I'm getting it. So many new people. Okay. Another piece that I want you all to know is that Leslie and I, work creatively. So much of what you will experience is us in the moment, talking about and being very transparent about our process. And it's interactive. So unlike what you're experiencing right now, when we are in the work together, we won't be talking to you very much. It will be interactive, and you will be engaged in process. So we'll give you a little taste of that in the fellowship hall this morning, just so you can feel like, I don't know, this is different. But I want you to know that is a very important piece of how we work, is interactively. And most importantly, I think, is supportively. We work supportively, and what I mean by that is that we support folks in co-creating your lasting solutions. We do that by cultivating restorative values and principles and restorative thinking along the healing journey. We do not provide answers, reports, recommendations, a judicial process of any kind. That's not what our work is. We do guide our clients, you all, through a process or a journey of discovering what you need and how you want to get there. Then we support your success in moving to that. Healing is hard work. It's personal work. It's communal work. And it's worthy work. We do this because we love human beings and we believe in our collective capacity to have conflict or difficult times, to move into and through those difficult times together toward better relationships, rooted in deeper respect. Respect as we take responsibility for our own actions and their consequences. Then we do what we can to repair harm and reconnect to a healthier, more whole community. I hope this helps you understand a little bit about 3 Stories Consulting and how we intend to move forward with you all as individuals, as people in relationship with each other, and as a congregation. So thank you so much for choosing 3 Stories Consulting.
Yeah, and we invite all of you to join us in a little bit of a sample of how we work, and it will actually be beginning our work together in our process in the community space. Did I say that right? in the community space. We'll start around 1:15 to give everybody a chance to have coffee and donuts and get settled in. And it'll be about 35, 45 minutes, so it won't be long. However, you'll get a real sense of who we are and how we like to work with people. Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, so I think the goal will be to start about 15, maybe 20 minutes after the service is over, enough time to get the coffee and so forth going. The sessions in there and as a community, when we're sharing and so forth, will not be recorded. There are going to be lots of ways to share, be it individually, small groups, and also our bigger facilitation like this morning. So think about how you'd like to plug in. We know that many of us have to be here via live streaming, so we'll be thinking about how to do that, perhaps with some Zoom pieces for you all, but encourage you all to participate in how you feel led. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here with us. There is Sunday school today and next Sunday. Following our sampling of and beginning of our facilitation process, the care team will have a training session downstairs in the sunroom. I am pleased to say that Romaine Anderson, our pianist, is going to be back next Sunday. So we're we will have a warm welcome for him. Also on February 14th at 5:30, there will be an Ash Wednesday service here in the community center. We're going to set up kind of a smaller space so that we can honor the beginning of the season of Lent leading up to Easter. We also learned that Grace Martin's family, Grace recently died. Her family would like to hold her memorial service here at FMC, and that will be in September on the 7th. So you'll, of course, we'll have more information about that coming up very shortly. And that is all we have. Yes, yes.
I'm sorry, I did forget one piece. Next Sunday, we would like to get together again with 3 Stories, and we want to start a little bit later. I haven't talked to anybody yet, but we kind of want to make that a potluck so we can do it, and it'll be more like hour and a half or 2-hour type thing. So be planning for that, and look forward to potluck.
Would you stand, please? And make note that this hymn is in your blue hymnal worship book, 117. Verses 1 through 3.